The morning sun cast long shadows across the Colorado mountains as Sarah Martinez adjusted her scope for the third time. 23 years old, former Marine Corps sniper, and, currently the only thing standing between Earth and complete subjugation. She hadn't asked for this responsibility, but, when the aliens came, someone had to make the hard choices. The Galactic Council had arrived 6 months ago with fanfare and promises. Their massive ships blocked out the sun over major cities, and their ambassadors spoke of bringing humanity into their civilized fold. What they didn't mention was the fine print. Earth would become a resource extraction site. Humans would be relocated to designated zones. Any resistance would be met with overwhelming force. Most governments had surrendered immediately. The Council's technology was thousands of years ahead of anything humans possessed. Their energy weapons could vaporize a tank in seconds. Their ships could glass entire cities from orbit. Resistance seemed futile. But Sarah had learned something important during her 3 tours in Afghanistan that the politicians and generals seemed to have forgotten. Superior technology didn't always win wars. Sometimes, one person with the right skills, in the right place, at the right time, could change everything. The Council had made their first mistake when they established their primary command center in the mountains of Colorado. They chose the location for its strategic position and defensible terrain, but they hadn't counted on the local knowledge of someone who had grown up hunting these very peaks with her grandfather. Their second mistake was underestimating human stubbornness. Sarah watched through her scope as the alien soldiers moved through their daily routines. They were called Zephyrians, tall and elegant creatures with pale blue skin and fur arms. Their technology made them confident, perhaps overconfident. They relied heavily on their energy shields and advanced sensors, but Sarah had noticed something interesting over the past 3 weeks of observation. Their shields had a cycling pattern. Every 47 seconds, there was a microsecond gap as the shield generators reset. It was barely noticeable, probably considered irrelevant by their engineers. After all, what primitive human weapon could exploit such a tiny window? They were about to find out. The target was Commander Vexai, the regional military governor who had overseen the pacification of the western United States. He was responsible for the detention camps, the resource extraction, and the systematic dismantling of human civilization in his sector. Intel suggested he was also one of only 3 beings with the authorization codes needed to communicate directly with the Council fleet. Sarah had been tracking his movements for 2 weeks. Every morning at exactly 0800 local time, Vexai would emerge from the command bunker to inspect the perimeter defenses. He would walk the same route, stop at the same observation points, and spend exactly 12 minutes reviewing tactical displays with his subordinates. Military precision. Sarah could respect that, even in an enemy. She checked her equipment one final time. The rifle was a custom-built .50 caliber, modified with components salvaged from destroyed alien technology. Her grandfather had been a gunsmith, and he'd taught her that every tool had its purpose. This tool's purpose was to send a message that would echo across the galaxy. The morning routine began as expected. Vexai emerged from the bunker, his forearms gesturing as he spoke to his aides. His energy shield shimmered around him like a soap bubble made of starlight. To most observers, he would appear invulnerable. Sarah controlled her breathing, feeling her heartbeat slow as training took over. In the Marines, they'd called her Ghost because of her ability to remain perfectly still for hours, invisible to both human and electronic eyes. Today, that patience would serve a purpose greater than any mission briefing had ever outlined. The commander reached his 3rd inspection point. Sarah's finger found the trigger. 47 seconds. 46. 45. Through her scope, she could see Vexai's alien features clearly. He looked confident, secure in his superiority. His kind had conquered 17 different species across 12 star systems. Humans were just another primitive race to be subjugated. 30 seconds. 29. 28. Sarah thought about her little brother Danny, who had been in one of the first detention camps. She thought about her parents, who had died defending their farm from the relocation teams.
She thought about the millions of humans who had already given up hope. 10 seconds. 9. 8.
The shield flickered. The bullet traveled 1,247 meters in 1.8 seconds, arriving just as the energy barrier completed its reset cycle.
The projectile, enhanced with alien metal alloys salvaged from a crashed scout ship, punched through Vexhi's chest with devastating effect. The commander dropped instantly. Chaos erupted in the compound below.
Alarms blared as soldiers scrambled for cover, their sensors sweeping frantically for the source of the attack.
But Sarah was already moving, using routes she had memorized during weeks of preparation.
She had studied these mountains since childhood. Every cave, every trail, every hiding spot was mapped in her memory. The aliens had superior technology, but they were fighting on her home ground now. As she moved through the forest, Sarah allowed herself a small smile. The shot had been perfect, but, more importantly, it had been witnessed. The other alien commanders would have seen their invulnerable leader fall to a primitive human weapon. Word would spread through their ranks like wildfire. Doubt was a powerful weapon, and she had just planted seeds that would grow into something much larger. The radio crackled to life on her hip.
"Ghost, this is base. Did you complete the mission?" Sarah keyed the mic as she moved through the dense underbrush. "Target down. Phase 1 complete. Copy that. Intelligence reports the aliens are already requesting reinforcements. Estimates 70,000 additional troops inbound." Sarah grinned fiercely. "Good. The more they send, the more targets we'll have." She had spent 6 months watching the aliens dismantle human civilization piece by piece.
She had seen the detention camps, the resource extraction facilities, the systematic destruction of everything her species had built. The Council thought humans were just another conquered race, primitive beings who would accept their fate. They were about to learn why humanity had clawed its way to the top of Earth's food chain despite having no natural weapons, no armor, no venom. They were about to discover what happened when you backed a social predator into a corner.
The hunt was just beginning. As Sarah disappeared into the mountain wilderness, emergency broadcasts were already racing toward the Council fleet.
The message was simple and urgent: send more soldiers.
The humans were fighting back. High Command's response was swift and predictable.
If one human sniper could cause this much damage, they would simply overwhelm the problem with superior numbers.
70,000 of the Council's finest soldiers would be deployed to hunt down and eliminate this threat. It was exactly what Sarah had hoped they would do. Phase 2 would begin when the reinforcements arrived.
And, when they did, they would discover that the mountains of Colorado held more than one angry human with a rifle and a grudge.
The galaxy was about to receive its first real lesson about humanity's true nature.
The reinforcement fleet arrived 3 days later, darkening the sky over Colorado with 70,000 of the Galactic Council's most elite warriors. General Cortez commanded the operation from his flagship, confident that this overwhelming display of force would quickly eliminate the human terrorist who had somehow managed to kill Commander Vexhi. The general had reviewed the tactical reports with growing disbelief. A single human, using primitive projectile weapons, had penetrated their most advanced defensive systems.
It was impossible, yet the evidence was undeniable.
Vexhi's body had been found with a hole clean through his chest, his personal shield generator still functional but somehow bypassed. Council scientists had spent 60 hours analyzing the attack, running simulations and testing theories. Their conclusion was disturbing: the human had identified a microscopic vulnerability in their shield technology and exploited it with surgical precision.
The implications were staggering.
But Cortez was a practical commander. Whatever clever trick the human had used, it wouldn't matter when faced with 70,000 soldiers equipped with the most advanced military technology in the galaxy. They would sweep these mountains clean and present the terrorists' corpse to High Command within the week. Sarah watched the alien ships deploy from her new position 15 miles deeper in the mountain range. She had anticipated their response, and, more importantly, she had spent the last 3 days preparing for it. The single sniper who had killed Vexhi was gone. In her place was something far more dangerous. The abandoned mine shaft behind her had been converted into a workshop and weapons cache. Sarah's grandfather had been more than just a gunsmith. He had been a military engineer who had spent his retirement years planning for scenarios that most people would consider paranoid fantasies. His preparations were about to justify decades of careful work.
The cache contained enough modified ammunition to supply a small army.
Each bullet had been handcrafted using alien materials salvaged from crash sites, enhanced with human metallurgy techniques that the Council's scientists had never encountered. The combination created projectiles that could punch through their energy shields during the vulnerable reset periods.
But Sarah wasn't alone anymore. The message had spread through underground networks faster than the aliens could track it.
The impossible had happened.
One of their commanders had fallen to human weapons.
The news had reached resistance cells across North America, Europe, and Asia. Veterans, hunters, and patriots who had been waiting for a sign that resistance was possible were now converging on Colorado. Jake Thompson arrived first, a former Army Ranger who had been leading guerrilla operations in Texas. Behind him came Maria Santos, a sniper instructor from the Philippines who had somehow managed to travel 9,000 miles to join the fight. Then came others, former Special Forces operators, Olympic marksmen, hunters who knew their local terrain better than any satellite could map. Each brought their own skills and equipment. Each had their own reasons for fighting. But they all shared one thing in common: they had refused to accept that humanity's story would end with surrender. Sarah stood in the main chamber of the converted mine, addressing the 37 fighters who had answered the call. Maps covered the rough stone walls, marking alien positions, patrol routes, and defensive installations.
Red pins showed confirmed targets. Black pins marked successful strikes. The aliens think in terms of overwhelming force, Sarah explained, her voice echoing in the enclosed space. They see a problem and they throw more soldiers at it. That's exactly what we want them to do. She pointed to the tactical display showing the alien deployment patterns. They've spread their forces across 100 square mile search grid. Professional, thorough, and exactly what we would do in their position. But they're making the same mistake that every occupying army makes: they're fighting the wrong war. Jake studied the map with a professional eye. 70,000 soldiers in this terrain.
They'll have overlapping fields of fire, aerial support, and technological superiority.
How do we even make a dent in those numbers? Sarah smiled grimly. We don't fight their war. We make them fight ours.
Over the next 4 hours, she outlined a strategy that would have seemed insane to any conventional military commander. Instead of trying to match the aliens' technological advantages, they would leverage humanity's greatest strength: adaptability. The plan relied on something the Council had never encountered in their previous conquests. Every other species they had subdued had fought conventional battles, trying to match superior technology with courage and determination.
Humans would do something different.
They would become ghosts in the mountains, striking from impossible angles and vanishing before retaliation could arrive.
The first attack came at dawn.
Team Alpha struck the alien supply convoy as it wound through Copper Canyon, a narrow pass that the aliens had identified as tactically secure. Maria Santos took the lead vehicle's commander with a perfect headshot through his shield's reset window. The convoy's response was immediate and overwhelming, energy beams turning the surrounding forest into an inferno. But the humans were already gone, having withdrawn through escape routes that predated the alien invasion by decades. Mining tunnels, hunting trails, and smugglers' paths that existed in no digital database became highways for phantoms who struck and vanished like smoke. The second attack hit the perimeter sensors on the northern approach. Jake Thompson's team used improvised explosive devices built from alien technology, creating gaps in their detection grid that shouldn't have been possible. When the aliens responded with reinforcements, they found nothing but scorched earth and empty mountains.
The third attack was personal.
Sarah herself took the shot that killed Sub-Commander Velfon as he inspected the damage from the morning's raids. The bullet traveled through 3 shield reset cycles before finding its target, a feat that the alien engineers declared mathematically impossible.
Yet Velfon's corpse told a different story.
General Corthaz received the casualty reports with growing fury. In less than 12 hours, the humans had killed 17 of his officers and destroyed millions of credits worth of equipment.
His technological advantages seemed meaningless against enemies who refused to fight by any recognizable rules.
"They're using our own tactics against us," his intelligence officer reported. "Quick strikes, withdrawal before counterattack, exploitation of terrain advantages."
But their precision is unprecedented.
"They're targeting specific individuals with weapons that shouldn't be capable of penetrating our defenses."
The general studied the tactical displays showing the scattered attack sites. "How many humans are we facing?" "Unknown, sir. Estimates range from 20 to 200. Their ability to move unseen through this terrain makes accurate counts impossible."
Corthas felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. His 70,000 soldiers were being picked apart by ghosts who appeared from nowhere and vanished just as quickly. Every time his forces moved to investigate an attack site, they found only empty wilderness and the growing certainty that they were being watched by unseen eyes.
The humans were doing more than fighting back.
They were demonstrating that the Council's military doctrine had a fatal flaw. All their previous conquests had involved species that fought conventional battles where technology provided decisive advantages.
Humans fought like predators, using patience and precision instead of brute force. As night fell over the Colorado mountains, Sarah checked her equipment one final time. Tomorrow's operation would be the most ambitious yet.
Intelligence suggested that General Corthas would personally oversee a massive sweep of the southern valleys. The alien commander wanted to end this embarrassment quickly and decisively. Sarah intended to give him exactly what he was looking for, just not in the way he expected. The hunter was about to become the hunted, and the galaxy would learn that humanity's greatest weapon had never been technology. It had always been the refusal to quit, even when facing impossible odds. The real war was just beginning. General Corthas stood on the command deck of his flagship, watching the tactical displays with the grim satisfaction of a predator closing in on wounded prey. 3 weeks had passed since the human insurgency began, and his patience was finally about to be rewarded. Intelligence had identified the location of the terrorist base, an abandoned mining complex in the heart of the Sangre de Cristo range. The irony wasn't lost on him that humans had named these mountains Blood of Christ.
Soon, they would live up to that name. "All units, commence Operation Cleansing Fire," the general commanded.
50,000 soldiers began their coordinated assault on the mining complex, supported by aerial bombardment and orbital fire support. The mountains erupted in flame as energy beams carved through stone and metal like a hot knife through flesh. But, as the smoke cleared, Corthas felt the first stirrings of unease.
The complex was empty.
Not abandoned in panic, but methodically evacuated. Every piece of useful equipment had been removed. Every strategic position had been prepared for demolition. The humans had known they were coming. "Sir," his communications officer called out, "we're receiving a transmission from the surface."
"It's on an open channel."
Sarah's voice filled the command bridge, clear and unafraid.
"General Corthas, this is Sarah Martinez.
I wanted to thank you for gathering all your soldiers in one convenient location. It's going to make this much easier." The general's 4 eyes narrowed.
"Human terrorist, you are surrounded by 50,000 of the finest soldiers in the galaxy. Surrender now and your death will be quick." Sarah's laugh echoed through the ship's speakers. "General, I think there's been a misunderstanding. You're not surrounding us. We're surrounding you."
Corthas was about to respond when the first explosions ripped through the valley below. Not the random detonations of desperate saboteurs, but precisely coordinated strikes that severed communication lines, destroyed supply depots, and eliminated escape routes with surgical precision. The humans hadn't been hiding in the mining complex. They had been using it as bait. While 70,000 alien soldiers had been searching the mountains for ghosts, Sarah's people had been busy. Mining tunnels that had been abandoned for decades became highways for moving troops and equipment. Every cave, every ridge, every hidden valley had been turned into a fortress manned by fighters who knew the terrain like their own backyard. Jake Thompson's team had spent 2 weeks rigging the main access roads with explosives built from alien technology. When the charges detonated, they didn't just block the routes, they triggered carefully planned rockslides that sealed the valleys like a tomb. Maria Santos had positioned herself and 15 other snipers on peaks that the aliens had deemed tactically irrelevant.
From these positions, they could observe every movement in the valley below.
Their modified rifles, enhanced with salvaged alien components, could reach targets at ranges the Council's scientists had calculated to be impossible for primitive human weapons. But the real masterstroke was the communication jamming.
Sarah's grandfather had been obsessed with electronic warfare during his military career.
The mining complex contained decades of accumulated equipment, including signal jammers that had been modified to disrupt alien frequencies. When activated, they created a dead zone where the invaders' technological advantages became meaningless. Cut off from orbital support and trapped in terrain that favored the defenders, the alien soldiers found themselves fighting a war they had never trained for. Their energy weapons were powerful but limited by battery life. Their armor was advanced but heavy in the thin mountain air. Their sensors were sophisticated but useless against enemies who moved through tunnels that existed in no database. General Cortez watched his tactical display dissolve into chaos as unit after unit reported contact with human forces.
The attacks came from everywhere and nowhere.
Soldiers would be advancing through a secure valley when rifle fire would erupt from ranges that should have been impossible.
By the time support arrived, the attackers would have vanished into the mountain itself.
"They're using the mining tunnels," his tactical officer reported.
"The humans can move unseen throughout the entire region.
Our soldiers are fighting shadows." The general's confidence began to crack as casualty reports poured in. Not the massive losses of conventional warfare, but the steady attrition of specialists and officers.
The humans weren't trying to destroy his army.
They were systematically dismantling its leadership and capability. Every communications specialist who exposed himself to establish contact with orbiting ships found himself in a sniper's crosshairs.
Every engineering team that attempted to clear the blocked roads discovered that the humans had prepared backup plans for their backup plans.
Every attempt to establish a secure perimeter failed as attackers materialized from underground like creatures from a nightmare. Sarah moved through the tunnel system with the fluid grace of someone who had spent her childhood exploring every passage. The network connected mining shafts that stretched across 50 square miles, creating a highway system that was invisible to alien sensors. At key junctions, her people had established supply caches and medical stations, turning the mountains themselves into a fortress. She emerged from a concealed entrance just in time to see another alien patrol making their way through Pine Creek Canyon.
The soldiers moved with professional competence, their weapons ready and their formation tight.
They were good troops by any measure, but they were fighting on humanity's terms now. Sarah's shot took the patrol leader cleanly, the bullet punching through his shield during its reset cycle. The remaining soldiers scattered for cover, but they were in a kill zone that had been prepared weeks in advance. Crossfire erupted from concealed positions on both sides of the canyon, and, within minutes, the patrol had ceased to exist. The aliens would find the bodies eventually, along with a message carved into the canyon wall: "Welcome to Earth." General Cortez received word of the patrol's destruction with a growing sense of dread. His forces were trapped in a maze of canyons and ridges where every position offered perfect concealment for human snipers. Aerial reconnaissance was useless against enemies who moved underground. Orbital bombardment was impractical without risking his own troops. For the first time in his military career, the general faced an enemy that couldn't be defeated by superior technology and overwhelming force. The humans were fighting with the patience of a species that had survived ice ages and asteroid impacts. They had turned their weaknesses into strengths and their homeland into a weapon. "Sir," his intelligence officer interrupted, "we've intercepted communications from the human resistance.
The signal is being broadcast across the entire planet."
Sarah's voice filled the bridge once again, but this time she wasn't speaking to Cortez. She was speaking to every human on Earth, her words carried by networks the aliens couldn't trace or stop. "This is Sarah Martinez, broadcasting from the Free Territory of Colorado.
To every human who can hear this message, they can be beaten. The aliens bleed just like we do. Their technology isn't magic, and their soldiers aren't invincible. We've proven that courage and determination can overcome any advantage. The transmission continued for 17 minutes, detailing tactics that had proven effective against alien technology.
Information about shield vulnerabilities, patrol patterns, and equipment weaknesses spread across the globe faster than the Council could respond. Resistance cells that had been dormant for months suddenly erupted into action, using Sarah's intelligence to strike at their occupiers with devastating effect. The rebellion was no longer confined to Colorado. It had become a global uprising. General Corthas watched his orderly conquest dissolve into chaos as reports flooded in from across the planet. Humans were attacking Council installations from Scotland to Singapore, using tactics that turned their technological disadvantages into strategic advantages. Every victory inspired more humans to join the fight, while every defeat taught them new ways to hurt their enemies. The Council had made a fundamental miscalculation. They had assumed that primitive humans would fight like every other conquered species, trying to match superior technology with desperate courage. Instead, humans had done what they always did when faced with a stronger predator. They had learned, adapted, and evolved new strategies that turned the hunters into the hunted. As dawn broke over the Colorado mountains, Sarah stood on a ridge overlooking the trapped alien army. 70,000 of the galaxy's finest soldiers were scattered across valleys that had become their prison. Communication with their fleet was impossible. Escape routes were sealed. Supply lines were cut. They had come to Earth expecting to face a primitive species armed with crude weapons and noble defiance. Instead, they had discovered what happened when you challenged a species that had fought its way to the top of the food chain not through strength or speed, but through the simple refusal to give up. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't technology or numbers. It was the absolute certainty that some fights were worth dying for, and the iron determination to make that death count. Sarah keyed her radio one final time. All units, this is Ghost. The galaxy wanted to meet humanity. Let's give them a proper introduction. The real war was about to begin, and the Council was finally going to understand why Earth had never been conquered, despite billions of years and countless predators. Some species were born to rule. Others were born to serve. Humans were born to survive, and that made all the difference.